Good afternoon. Welcome. I'm Darlene Lanham, Executive Director of Asian Family Support Services of Austin, and I thank you for joining us here today. We come together today to share our grief in the lives lost in Indianapolis, to create a safe and welcoming space for ourselves and for one another as we face the reality that Sikh lives were taken this time. What happened in Indianapolis hurts us here in Austin. What happened to Sikh people hurts our Muslim and Hindu and Buddhist hearts. When Asian lives are lost in Indiana, Asian lives in Texas feel the pain in our chests. We wish you comfort in faith practices and secular reflections that are offered in this space today. Our hearts hurt. We are exhausted by the senselessness of mass murders, and we are exhausted by being targeted. As we resist the urge to numb ourselves in the present reality, that we have lost vibrant and beautiful Sikh people in a daily mass shooting, let us resist that numbness by making sure that we are not in isolation. Connectedness, close and trusting relationships is the most powerful protective factor to avoid interpersonal violence. And when humans are connected to each other authentically and with trust, humans do not commit mass murders. So please join with us today in connection. I want you to know that Team AFSA is here for your connection. We are here with our whole hearts, for you, with you, beside you, to journey with you in the many ways that you'd like to think about your safety, your autonomy, your human rights, and your heart's needs. AFSA has a 24/7 hotline. We speak your language, literally, and we're ready for you. Exactly who you are, how you are, all the things that you bring, and all the many ways that you may bring it. We do a lot of centering on our own identities, so we know what it means to have someone stand with you in dignity in all of the ways that you are, because it's all of the ways that we are too. Our hearts are with yours. I'm coming here today to seek comfort and togetherness because I believe in the power and resilience of our people. And I know that together, if we resist isolation and if we stick together, we will create the day where mass murders and collective traumas are just something we read about in history books. Resist the urge to isolate. Join with AFSA and with our whole community in connection. Welcome and thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Darlene. We really appreciate everyone joining us today. We're very honored to have all of you. My name is Khushbu Panchwani. I'm the Outreach Advocate at AFSA, and I'll just be going over some community agreements before we get started. We just wanted to say that we have a zero tolerance policy in this event and at all of our events for racism, anti-Blackness, homophobia, transphobia, classism, casteism, and any other ism that is discriminatory. Thank you so much. We'll be moving on to our next speaker now.
Hi all, we're moving into the memorial part of our gathering. 1 month ago exactly, a gunman entered a FedEx facility in Indianapolis and took 8 lives. Right now, we'd like to recognize and honor those lives by reading the names of the victims. 2 members of our outreach staff, Zara Shakar Jamal and Angela King, will be reading the names.
Amarjeet Kaur Johal, Jaswinder Kaur, Amarjeet Sekhon, Jaswinder Singh.
Samaria Blackwell, Carly Smith, John Weisert, Matthew Alexander.
Thanks all. We want to mark those lives. We also want to think about the COVID crisis in India and across South Asia, remembering that to date, they're saying it's 263,317 lives that have been lost to COVID. We know 2 things about that number. It's severely, severely undercounted, and that no number can measure or contain the loss and the pain that our communities and our families are feeling. And for many of us, these families are our families and these communities are our communities. And I think there is an extra pang of grief when you are so far away from the people that you love and care about and you can't get there to be with them. So we want to take a moment to also just mark the loss of life and the suffering happening in our own communities in South Asia. And we hope that soon this crisis will end and we'll be able to spend some time with our loved ones in health and happiness. Right now, we'd like to take a moment of silence, so 1 minute, to mark the lives lost in Indianapolis and the ones being lost in South Asia right now. Thank you. Now we'd like to move into some of our community speakers representing some of our spiritual and faith communities throughout Central Texas and here in Austin. First is Judith Kaur. She is a board member of the Singh Sabha Gurdwara of Austin, which represents the work and aspirations of the larger Sangath around Austin, Texas.
Thank you all for coming today and standing in solidarity with each other to share this collective grief. In the Sikh tradition, both pleasure and pain remind us of the transience of life and encourage us to live as divine conscious beings in this world. So let us derive strength to heal from senseless acts that inflict pain and fear, and remember what our scriptures tell us. In Sikhism, we are taught the concept of hukam, meaning the command or the divine order. It refers to the invisible workings of the Creator. Although our goal is to understand and harmonize with the idea that everything happens within the realm of His hukam, whether it is sorrow, happiness, union, or separation. Our scriptures also teach us to be sensitive, to be awake, and to be receptive to a dynamic universe. Each one of us shares a responsibility of changing the world, especially in the face of oppression and adversity. We all have the ability to work towards eliminating strife and bringing harmony, to resisting violence and spreading love. The teachings of Sikh theology are not religion specific, rather they are creation specific and all-encompassing. This means that it is a universal and non-discriminatory in nature. When the Sikhs pray or recite Ardas, a prayer in which they compulsorily utter Nanak Naam Chardi Kala, Tere Bhane Sarbat Ta Bhala, we request the Almighty to invoke Chardi Kala or positivity. We ask the Almighty to keep us in high spirits under His guidance with the hope that this relentless spirit of optimism will tide us through all times, good or bad. The second part, Sarbat Da Bhala, is a prayer asking the Almighty that His blessings be showered on all of humanity, rather on the entire creation without any discrimination. This powerful prayer is based on the Sikh concept of inclusivity, brotherhood, and harmony. Of the 25 million Sikhs around the world, an estimated 500,000 live in the US, and yet about 60% of Americans do not know who Sikhs are or what their core values are. In fact, one of the core values of the Sikh religion is to stand up for human rights. We have been taught by example by our gurus to hold steadfast to our principles of fighting injustice, fearing none, and scaring none. In our present context, we can fight the injustices that we see targeted towards certain communities. But how do we do this? Firstly, we need to acknowledge that each of us has a unique role to play in breaking down barriers that prevent us from recognizing our common humanity. We can work with our political leaders to see that our communities are not denied equal rights. We can also make an investment teaching our children about our history and our roots so that they can talk to their peers intelligently and prevent any unnecessary social bias and contribute towards respecting the diversity of our nation. And indeed, the reason for our presence today is not only to comfort each other as we mourn the loss of those who fell victims to systemic racism, but also to stand with each other as a community and rise together in this fight against generations of injustice that we've seen, against the distrust, and against communities that have experienced and are still experiencing racial trauma. I would like to quote a few lines by the 10th Guru, Guru Gobind Singh Ji. Dehura Maseet Soi, Puja O Nivaj Oi, Manas Sabhe Ek Pe, Anek Ko Bhramao Hai, meaning the temple and the mosque are the same. There is no difference between a Hindu prayer or a Muslim prayer. All human beings are the same, although they may appear to be different. Let us remember these teachings and resolve today to break down superficial barriers of prejudice and hostility by coming together as one, despite our differences. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Thank you. That was so beautiful. And I think captures the spirit of what those of us, all of us who came together to organize this event really wanted to do today. Thank you. Next, we have Jan Schep. He is a retired structural engineer, married to Alice for 51 years. He is active in his church and the president of the Indian American Coalition of Texas, IACT, which educates, engages, and empowers the Indian American community in Central Texas and beyond.
Thank you, Monica, for the introduction. In 1972, Ugandan dictator kicked out from Uganda Indians and Pakistanis, and he assumed that the wealth they have will be part of Ugandans who were born in Uganda of African origin. But that didn't happen. The Uganda economy was ruined. But it happened because Indians were not involved politically in Ugandan system. It said that if you're not at the table, you're part of the menu. That means that the decision process, if you're not part of the decision process, the decisions that will be made may not be favorable to you. Same way Indian Americans in the United States were not involved in the political decision-making process for a long time. Only in the later half of last century, in 1990s, they started organizing, and that's how the Indian American Coalition of Texas was born in 2005, to get Indian Americans involved in the political and social and civic affairs of this country. Recently, members of the Indian American Coalition of Texas, IACT, plus many other Indians and Asians all over the United States, started writing to their congressmen and senators about Asian Americans' hate crimes, the crimes that are committed against Asian Americans. And that's why last month, Senate passed a bill, Anti-Asian Hate Bill, which is now going to be considered in the House next week, and it will become a law. That's why we ask all the Indian Americans and other Asians to be involved in political affairs of this country. That's the mission of IACT, so we can be part of the decision-making process. Now, we have made some progress over the years. In 1970s, I was working in California as a large engineering corporations. My Indian American boss told me that he has gone as high as he can in that corporation. He was supervising 30 people, and there's 2 slots below the vice president slot. Today, large corporations with thousands of employees have Indian American CEOs. So we have made the progress. But let's get back to the laws. We can encourage our senators and congressmen to make the laws that will protect Asian Americans, but only a few people will be deterred by laws. Only God can change the heart of the people. When Jesus was here on the earth, someone asked him, what's the most important law? And God had given 10 commandments plus many other laws before the time of Jesus. And Jesus says, only 2 are important. Love God and love other people. Jesus knew it would be difficult to follow the second command, love other people. So he also said that what's not possible for man is possible with God. God can change the heart of the people. So let's pray for God to change the heart of the people. Dear God, you made the stars in the heavens and the earth and everything that's on it. You can change the heart of the people. We are looking to you today in the name of Jesus that you will work on the heart of the people of this country, from being violent to being kind, from being ignorant to being understanding, and from being hateful to be loving. Only you can do that. And we commit ourselves here, who are attending this meeting, that we will try and do that with your help, to love the people of all different colors and all different nationalities. And we pray that you will also do that for the rest of the people in this country. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We really appreciated that, and also just looking at kind of our past as a community politically in the U.S. Now, I'd like to introduce Elaine Su. She is the president of the Austin chapter of Buddha's Light International, BLIA. BLIA is an international non-government organization composed of monastic and lay people. BLIA enacts humanistic Buddhism, which is committed to equality, respect for others, and social progress. Thank you, Elaine.
Hello, everyone. On behalf of Venerable Jueji, Director of the Shangyin Temple, located on the 360, I would like to deliver a prayer for the Indianapolis victim by Venerable Master Xing Yun. O great compassionate Buddha, today, in a heavy state of mind, I would like to tell you of the injustice and the calamity in our world. Out of greed and hatred, people like to fight. Out of anger, people like to fight. Out of wrong views, people like to fight. Gentle people become hurt. Innocent people become victimized. O great compassionate Buddha, hate crimes have deeply affected people in the Indianapolis community. People have been deprived of equal rights. People fear for their safety in daily life. Hate crime create disputes and disturb the peace. They use violence with no regard for humanity. They destroy the precious life of others. Only by being kind to each other and being respectful of each other can people coexist as one and be in harmony to share prosperity. I pray to you, Buddha. Please let people open their hearts with tolerance. Please mend the wounded hearts with compassion. O great compassionate Buddha, only by relying on your respectful, inspiring virtues can we all distance ourselves from greed, anger, and confusion. Only by following your teachings and admonitions can we all distance ourselves from wrong views and ignorance and delusion. O great compassionate Buddha, I pray for your great protection. From today on, all people should vow to work in close cooperation to create a blissful and happy society, to unite and collaborate to achieve a peaceful and coexistent world. O great compassionate Buddha, please accept my sincerest prayer. O great compassionate Buddha, please accept my sincerest prayer. Amitabha. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was beautiful. And thank you for being here today. Now we are going to have AFSA's own Khushal Singh, who's going to do a reading from the Muslim faith.
Hi, everyone. I want to thank you all for joining me and all of us again. My name is Khushbu. I will be doing the Muslim prayer, and I will be reading from a sheet called An Islamic Perspective on Death, which is often read at funerals, though there's small sectarian differences. Muslims understand life on earth as a short passage into eternity. The soul is created and given human form. Physical life on this earth is limited in time, but the life of the soul, that is, the spiritual life, is eternal, and the soul yearns to return to Allah. Muslims accept the gift of life as an imana, a trust and an opportunity bestowed by Allah. Like birth, death is also accepted as the will of Allah. The acceptance of the eternal life of the soul and the absolute will of Allah is best reflected in a Quranic ayat, which most Muslims recite when informed of death. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi rajiun, meaning, verily, we belong to Allah, and to Him we shall return. Surah 2, ayat 156. It is in this understanding of returning to Allah that one finds consolation and solace at a time of severe loss and significant grief. Feelings of sadness and weeping are certainly considered normal, as these are signs of tenderness and compassion in the heart. However, indulgence and excessive expression of unrestrained grief is discouraged. Believers are urged to bear pain and affliction with patience, seeking Allah's mercy for strength and courage in the face of calamity. and this is me speaking. This prayer is not specific to people who have been taken violently, but just people in general. Yeah, I'm going to continue. Muslims are encouraged to pray for forgiveness and mercy for the departed souls and focus on the spiritual journey rather than the physical. The prayers and rituals aim to emphasize hope and inspiration for the believers. This emphasis stresses both the boundless mercy of Allah as well as Allah's prerogative as the sole judge. Finally, this is also a time when the community comes together around the grieving families to provide comfort and solace. The community provides support and plays a key role in ensuring that final rites are provided with dignity and compassionate care. In the Muslim tradition, it is considered a privilege to reach out to the family and participate in the last rites of the deceased. Now I'll be reciting just 3 or 4 times one of the main prayers that the people from my sect and I say at our funerals. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa Muhammad. 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 Thank you so much.
Thank you, Khushbu. That was really beautiful. We're now going to move to Ruta Banerjee. She's going to be singing some Hindu music for us. She is a professional vocalist with a repertoire ranging from Hindustani classical to Bollywood to folk, and she moved to the US in 2017 from New Delhi. She's also the founder of Austin-based Ragni Music School, where she imparts vocal training to those wishing to learn the nuances of Indian music. So welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for this introduction, Menka. First of all, I would like to thank Team AFSA for organizing this event. So today I'm going to sing this prayer song. It serves as a request to the Almighty to bless us with solidarity with those who lost their beautiful lives. हमको मन की शक्ति देना, मन विजय करे, दूसरों के जैसे पहले खुद को जय करे। हमको मन की शक्ति देना, मन विजय करे, दूसरों के जैसे पहले खुद को जय करे। हमको मन की शक्ति देना. Give a strength of mind, that the mind may be victorious. That before others' victory, the self is victorious. भेद भाव अपने दिल से साफ कर सके, दोस्तों से भूल हो तो माफ कर सके, से बचे रहे, सच कदम भरे, दूसरों के जैसे पहले खुद को चेक करे, हमको मन की शक्ति देना. May we be able to cleanse our hearts of divisions and discord. May we be able to forgive friends who err. May we be safe from falsehood. And may truth be our very breath. Before others' victory, may the self be victorious. मुश्किलें पढ़े तो हम पे इतना कर्म कर, साथ दे तो धर्म का, चले तो धर्म पर, खुद पे हौसला रहे, बड़ी से ना डरे, दूसरों के जैसे पहले खुद को चेक करे, हमको मन की शक्ति देना. If difficulties befall us, may we strive on. May we abide only by truth and walk with truth. May we have self-conviction and not fear adversity. Before others' victory, may the self be victorious. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Ritu, for that beautiful, beautiful song and rendition. Now we will be moving on to the speaker portion of of this event, and we will be beginning with Dr. Amritjit Singh. Dr. Amritjit Singh is the Langston Hughes Professor Emeritus of English and African American Studies at Ohio University, and a visiting fellow at the South Asia Institute, University of Texas at Austin. An internationally known scholar of ethnic American, South Asian, post-colonial, and migration studies, he has lectured and taught widely in Europe, Africa, Asia, and North America. Dr. Singh has authored, edited, or co-edited over 20 projects, including the novels of the Harlem Renaissance and Revisiting India's Partition, essays on culture, memory, and politics. We are extremely honored to have him here today. He will be speaking a little bit about the history.
Thank you, Khushbu. The introduction is longer than the one promised, but thank you all the same. All of you know Samira Ghosh, and I came in early into these conversations that started with EFSA. And if you know Samira, the combination of sweetness and grit, if she tells you to do something, you have only one choice, which is to do it. So I started on this work, trying to conceptualize this. I was a kind of a sounding board, and what they call the concept note in South Asia. So I thought that the tragedy in Indianapolis is a reminder that while the recent anti-Asian hatred has been directed at East Asians, we are all interconnected communities. And it sent me back to Oak Creek in Wisconsin. It sent me back to 9/11, after which mostly South Asians were attacked. But it also goes back to the 70s when you had the terrible incident with Vincent Chin. But around the same time, you had dartbusters who were attacking South Asians. So the point I want to make actually, which is a good way to kind of seg into this, is that it's important for us to look at the interconnectedness of historical experience. I'm a literature professor who likes to teach literature through history, not through abstract theory, as some of my colleagues in English and philosophy do. So, for example, again, regarding the incident in Indianapolis, I'll mention a short story that Jewish writer Philip Roth wrote when he was only 20 years old. I hope some of you will check it out. It's available on the web. It's called Conversion of the Jews, where a little boy named Izzy gets his elders in the synagogue to acknowledge that an airplane accident was not a tragedy because 6 Jews died, but because 22 human beings died. Indianapolis is a tragedy not because 6 died. Indianapolis is a tragedy because 8 human beings died. And their families have been left suffering. Some of them were the breadwinners for the families. So I sent a message to the organizers of the GoFund drives. There were 3 of them in Indianapolis. You can't write them by name. You just send a general message through GoFund. And they came back with a very beautiful response. I suggested that the money they are collecting should be distributed equally among the 8 families. And they assured me that they were already doing that. That's how it should be. So, so this gathering is important for Texans and others because we want to stand in solidarity. But it also reminds of, as you all know well, of the so many terrible incidents like this that have happened. I'm thinking of the incident in South Carolina, the Charleston incident, Sandy Hook incident, the Florida high school incident, the Columbian high school 1999. So just in the last 20 years, we have had so many incidents, and it signals the need for just basic common sense gun reforms. We don't need automatic weapons in order to exercise Second Amendment. And so I just want to, not only pivot the ideas that Jubit already mentioned. Guru Gobind Singh, she quoted Guru Gobind Singh. Guru Gobind Singh's the line that we quote even more often is, Manas ki jaat sab eko pachanvo. All of us are the same. You can go to Baba Farid, also in Guru Granth Sahib. You can go to Kabir. Awwal Allah noor upaya, kudrat ke sab bande. एक नूर से सब जग उपजिया, कौन भले कौन मंदे. All the caste systems that we have created, all the inequalities we have created. So I want to just remind you of this need for young people particularly to learn the history, not only the history of South Asians in this country or South Asians in South Asia, but also other historical experiences. We should learn about the experiences of European immigrants. We should learn about the experience of African Americans. Because in Asian American history, and I'm going to give you 2 quick examples and then stop, a lot of things did not happen because the people were not in communication with each other. The point that Jayant made with IACT, if you don't participate in the political, social, economic life of the society you live in, you are going to be the loser. You first have a contribution to make. Your points of view, perspectives, they are important for everyone. So South Asians have been very much at the center of Asian American history. I mean, I don't know how many of people know that the first Asian American congressman was not a Chinese American. He was not a Japanese American. He was not a Filipino American. Those are pretty large community. It was a South Asian. It was a Sikh, Dalip Singh Song. He was in the House of Representatives from 1957 to 1963. But I want to go back a little earlier where there was some communication. In 1922, a Japanese American who lived in Hawaii, his name was Ozawa, he went to the court, all the way to the Supreme Court, asking to be given citizenship. And he was told by the court that since he's neither black, because blacks were allowed to have citizenship after Civil War, although it was taken away from them beginning in 1877. By 1896, we made segregation legal. But since he was not black and he was not white, it's denied. He was in touch with an Indian, a Sikh, Bhagat Singh Thind, who went up to the court in 1923. And the court said, yes, we acknowledge you are a Caucasian. Remember, we talk about the Indo-Aryans, we talk about the Aryans and Dravidians in India. We learned all that. Even Hitler kind of acknowledged, but Hitler also did what the Supreme Court did. They said, okay, you are Caucasian, but how are we going to tell the French person in the streets that you are the same Caucasian, the same white person that he is? So your petition is denied. And you know, Sikhs tend to be pretty adamant about what they believe. He kept fighting it, in 1937, he was granted citizenship. So here there was communication, but it didn't help immediately. Here's the second example. Around World War I, there were Aryan Land Acts passed by this government around 1913, 1914. And Japanese Americans were suffering from those laws, and South Asian Americans, Indian Americans, at that time mostly Sikhs, were also affected by those very unfair laws. The Irish could come and they were not citizens and they could get everything. There was a Sikh named Khushal Singh, Pohkar. You can Google him. He had acquired 350 acres in California. And in one sweep, it was all taken away from him. So he tried to make a deal with two of his white friends. And as soon as he signed the papers, they said, nothing doing. Its property is ours. And he took action. He killed one of them. And he went to the house of the other one, and he was about to kill the second one. And his wife stood in the door. She was pregnant with her second child. And she said, Khushal, you told me that I am your sister. Are you going to make your sister a widow? And he dropped the gun and he was arrested. And later on, he spent time in the jail. But he came back and again became a successful farmer. So the Japanese Americans and the Indian Americans at that time had no communication that they were dealing with the same issues. So today it's important that South Asian Americans form coalitions with Chinese Americans. They form coalitions with African Americans. They form coalitions with Hispanic Americans, find common ground, because the smaller the community, the less you are able to get things done. And sure, Asians, if the 100,000 Chinese who were here in 1850s, they had not been stopped by the Chinese Exclusion Act and 1924 National Origin Act, Asian population today would be like 12% or so. It's only 4 or 5%. And that's because we were not able to work together. And we are now able to work together. And this is the importance of what we are doing today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Singh. That was very insightful. We really appreciate all of your wisdom. Now I will be introducing our next speaker, Dr. Eric Tang. Dr. Tang is an associate professor in the African and African Diaspora Studies Department and director of the Center for Asian American Studies at UT Austin. He also directs the university's undergraduate major in race, indigeneity, and migration. His first book, titled Unsettled Cambodian Refugees in the NYC Hyperghetto, is an ethnographic account of refugee life in some of New York City's most impoverished and socially marginalized neighborhoods. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Tang. We're very honored.
Thank you so much for having me this afternoon. It's an honor to be with all of you. I'm sitting outdoors, so if you hear some background noise, including birds chirping and children playing, it's for everyone's enjoyment. It's good to see you all. It's good to see some familiar faces. And, it's good to be in solidarity and in community with people during these difficult times. So I just want to begin by saying that. I'm going to keep my comments brief. I believe that Dr. Singh has really done a great job of giving us the historical context. And maybe what I'd like to do is talk about the present, talk about the past 50 or so years. I've studied several shootings like the one we saw in Indianapolis, like the one we saw in Atlanta. And what I can tell you is that these shootings have taken place over the course of the past 30 to 40 years, primarily. The first one involving Asians actually happened in 1989 in Stockton, California. It was arguably the first school shooting, and yet few people remember the Stockton school shooting for obvious reasons. And those reasons are that the victims were all children of refugees from Cambodia and Vietnam, people who were invisible in life and so too in death. This was before Columbine, and yet this shooting did not remain in the national collective conscience. Okay. Since then, we saw a mass shooting in Oak Creek, Wisconsin, just south of Milwaukee, right, in which 7 members of the Sikh community were massacred. And then we had the events of March 16th, 2021, where 8 people were massacred, 6 of whom were Asian immigrant women, followed by the events in Indianapolis. So what do all 4 events share in common, aside from the fact that all the victims, all the murdered were Asian? They share in common that they all happened in what is arguably known as the post-civil rights moment, the moment of multiculturalism, the moment of tolerance, the moment of racial equality. And so here's the question I want to pose this afternoon, and that is, why is it that the moment of civil rights and the moment of multiculturalism has actually been the deadliest for Asian Americans? And one answer that comes to mind has to do with the nature of white supremacy. See, white supremacy is most potent when it is revanchist. What does that mean? When it sees itself as on the defensive, as needing to ascend, as needing to what? To take back what it feels it lost. In other words, white supremacy is most potent when it is at war. And it needs to be at war in order to do its work. And so the post-civil rights moment, the moment of multiculturalism, the new immigrant moment marked by the post-1965 era is also, in the view of white supremacists, a period of warfare, of their ascendancy. And I say this because I think we need to understand what exactly we're dealing with. We're not dealing with hate. or the individual mental instability of an individual. We're dealing with a 50-year low-intensity warfare on the part of white supremacists who feel that something's been taken from them. And I think clarifying the terms of what's happening is important, because we will easily kind of get lost in thinking that if certain hate crime laws are passed, this won't happen again, right? But if these hate crimes laws don't actually address what is happening, then it will happen again. Those of you on this call who know me, tell me if this is a fair statement. I am not a cynic. I don't do cynicism very well. I tend to be more optimistic, usually to people's annoyance. However, I will say this. There is a reason why the one bill that Congress passed unanimously in recent years, right? The one bill that it passed unanimously in recent years had to do with Asian Americans and hate crimes. It passed unanimously because everyone could get behind what? Racial hatred is bad, and we should fund the police. We should fund the FBI. We should fund the state. Because that's what that bill was essentially. It said two things: racism is bad, and we should give more money to the Department of Justice to investigate hate crimes. It passed 94-1. However, had that bill really been about doing what? Looking into the ascendancy of white supremacist warfare in the United States and putting our energies behind that, something tells me it wouldn't have passed so unanimously. And so I promise to keep my comments brief. I'm wrapping up here. What I think I want to draw our attention to is how we can think about what's happening beyond the notion of hate and individual mental instability, because I think that in some ways distracts us from what is really happening. And what's really happening is that we are living through a moment that's been with us for the better part of 50 years, in which white supremacy is very potent in this country. And it looks for perceived enemies that it can target. Sometimes that front is legislative, sometimes it's carceral, in terms of how white supremacist warfare tries to enhance the punishment industries in our country. A lot of times it's cultural. We're dealing with that every day at the University of Texas. And sometimes it takes the form of naked terror. And that's exactly what happened in Indianapolis. And so, again, if I can contribute anything to this discussion, it's about looking more carefully and more precisely at what we're dealing with. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tang. There's never been a single time that I've heard Dr. Tang speak that hasn't been insightful and that hasn't made me question things more deeply. I was in a class with him for a brief period, so thank you so much. Yes, I agree. Sabiha, thank you so much for your comment in the chat. Next, I'll be introducing another community member. Her name is Gunjan Mittal. Gunjan currently works for the Health Equity Unit at Austin Public Health as the neighborhood liaison and co-lead to the API task force. She also co-hosts with her partner, Sustainable Humane Earth, or She, a permaculture business addressing sustainable solutions for food insecurity. She is a mother to her 5-year-old daughter. Gunjan has years of experience in working within gender-based violence movement and systems-level advocacy work, specifically around immigrant and refugee populations. She is also an artist, a dancer, a trauma-sensitive yoga therapist who is dedicated to creating avenues towards radical self-healing and liberation, and creating a more just, equitable, and compassionate world. Thank you so much for being here, Gunjan.
Thank you, Khushbu. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here and to share space with all of you. And thank you for inviting me to speak. I wanted to just put, I kind of have prepared something a little long, so please bear with me, I'm sorry. But I've had a lot of thoughts recently, but I stand in solidarity with the Sikh community and other BIPOC communities victimized by racial trauma. And I'd like to take a moment here to honor our ancestors, gurus, teachers, and those who have come before us, who have touched our hearts and created a platform for us to stand on today. So I wasn't sure what to share today exactly, but once I began to slowly digest the current state of the world, and once my rage finally subsided, the topic that revealed itself to me was something that I've been actively applying and integrating into my own daily life. And I just wanted to share some raw thoughts and feelings around my healing journey, and just being present with myself, with others, and with my place in this world amid all of the chaos. And all the while being cognizant of the fact that I have immense privilege to even have the time and space to sit and contemplate. So for that, I'm very, very grateful. And after more than a year, I guess now a year and a half of the global pandemic, we now know that reported hate crimes and incidents in all major cities across the nation has increased by 150%. And that, to me, is a very staggering number, although we know that this is not a new issue, as we've all been discussing here. And we all know, because we were born into the struggle of the diaspora, right? And so I'd like to take a pause for the cause right now, because today, as we memorialize and honor those who were forced to transition on way, thus creating this impetus for social change, and as we grieve together, it feels necessary for us to take a little step back and recognize some things, and something that's undeniably moving us, that's shaking us, awakening us, and something that's bringing us back to our nature, which to me goes beyond all of our internal conflicts that we, as the children of the diaspora and as immigrants and refugees, confront on the regular. And I'm talking about sharing our honest stories and feelings with one another. It's a very simple concept. It's nothing too complex. And our stories will literally die with us if we're not speaking them into existence and passing them on. And so I think about the innocent people murdered in the shooting. They left stories untold and that will never be known. And our stories absolutely need to be uplifted, amplified, and visibilized. And we all have a story, including the people who have inflicted harm and racialized violence against others. So I began thinking about how we remember that all fed a story from when we were younger about a certain group of people or anything for that matter, right? And when we're taught specifically to centralize or pedestalize whiteness or another dominant culture from any country, then everything else is automatically either inferior or the other unknown. And that, to me, that's very dangerous. That sticking to that single story or a single criticism or that single assessment or opinion. And recently I was reading Chimamanda Adichie describes how our points of views narrow based on the types of stories that we hear. And if we're only fed that one story about a particular people or even about ourselves, then in time we'll start believing that story because it's the only one we've ever heard. But how do we unlearn something that's been so woven tightly within the very fabric of our society? And I know that I don't have to really preach to the choir here about systemic and institutionalized racism. I feel like everyone here is well informed. And the feelings that I have in response to everything it just feels very taxing and depleting. And we can talk and intellectualize about the historical context of these horrific acts and violence and harassment, which are all very important and valid. But what about the aftermath, right? What happens after all of the tragedy and trauma? And so I found myself kind of looking to external means to find solace and peace to heal my internal wounds. So where does that healing and healing justice work fit into the greater context of these dialogues? And I feel like a shift must take place within us so that we can come together more as a whole person to strategize, co-create, to mobilize, to mourn together, and to heal together in order to expect a shift from the world. And what happened in Indianapolis and Atlanta, to me, was very indicative of an injured society. Hurt people hurt people. And this is not to undermine all of the other variables that intersect with all of the isms that may be there. But that our solutions to these issues must also come from our lived human experience, not just from the academic or social media world, so that we can start living out the liberation that we're trying to create in our minds and bodies, right? And transformational healing is very intentional work that can uplift those we want to build power with. And while this work is not easy, there is so much power in the spoken word and in our ancestral wisdom. Stories of our migration journey, diasporic stories, are kind of the threads that weave us together and are integral to creating a more just world. And my personal ultimate goal is to move the center and decentralize whiteness and the concept of otherness, this kind of single story that can breed hate. And I see us building resiliency, where we begin having more honest conversations about our lives, our children, our relationships to one another, our relationship to the earth and nature, about our past traumas, future triggers, about our shame and guilt, and so on. And by channeling our energies in this way, among many other healing modalities, can lead us to collective healing and then to collective liberation. And I really just wanted to bring us into a space of contemplation and reflection, to turn the lens back at ourselves just for a bit, to be accountable and analyze our own contribution to societal issues while trying to create solutions for them. Being Desi is not easy while living here. And at the end of the day, we must find new breath to come at our own personal and global problems with clarity, focus, and equanimity. And as a mother, I understand the importance of keeping my loved ones close and of sharing my own struggles and stories of our nana nani, dada dadi to my daughter, so that she can carry on that wisdom and legacy and hopefully have a part in creating a better world. And yeah, that's basically it. And I really thank you so much for allowing me to share my reflections and hope it resonated with you and made sense. I really appreciate everyone's shares and everything that so far I've heard. I'm just like snapping away at everything. So I appreciate everything and for all of AFSA to organize this. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Gunjan. We definitely understood everything you were saying, and it was wonderful hearing you speak. We're really glad that you were here. Now I'll be introducing our next speakers. The last three speakers we have are all youth speakers from the local Austin community. We are extremely honored to have them here today. The first one that will be speaking will be Khushal Singh. Khushal Singh is I believe, sophomore in high school in Austin and is a student, and we're excited to hear more about him.
Why does racism still exist? Everybody knows it is wrong and evil by definition. The answer is confined communities, feeding off each other's hate and a lack of information. Everybody, no matter who you are, will have some people you like and some people you dislike. The problem is when you don't see other races and cultures as people, but as something unassociated with you, who has taken something away, a different group. It's the superiority and the distance between the two groups where the problem lies. So as a community, in order to defeat racism, we need to do one thing: go out of our own community, talk to new people, lose any preconceived notion of what certain people are like, and merge communities and make one large, happy group. Like Miss Mitchell said, when you hear only one side, you only think of that one side. But when you meet more people, you see them as humans rather than the other side. By interacting with them as humans, it's harder to already think of them in one way. It's easier to say, I hate all Asians when you don't know any Asians than it is to say, I hate my friend who is Asian and some other guy who is nothing like them, but just comes from the same place. So to end racism, we need to talk to more people, learn about new cultures, introduce ourselves to new people. But nobody will just wake up one morning and suddenly do this. Instead, they need to be introduced to new people early on in life. And this process has to start from childhood. And with the internet, as widespread as it is, it's easier than ever. I can go onto my computer, go to Khan Academy, and I can be taught something from the other side of the country or the other side of the world even. And it's going to be taught in a similar way to somebody in my classroom teaching it to me. I can go onto YouTube and my neighbor can make a funny YouTube video, but so can somebody in a different continent. By introducing us to these different cultures, we can merge the groups and really understand each other. The world has the tools to chip away at racism. Let's grab the chisel and make the world a happier place.
Thank you so much, Khushal. That was wonderful. We really appreciate your passion and your vigor. It's really inspiring to see our youth speak in this way. Next, we'll be having two more youth speakers. I'll introduce both of them right now. So the first speaker is Sanya Sultan. She is a freshman in high school. And the second speaker will be Nabila Sultan, who is a junior in high school. They are both politically and civically active and love to get involved. They run their own nonprofit organizations.
Hi, my name is Nabila.
And my name is Sanya.
We were deeply affected by the act of violence that took place in Indiana, and our deepest sympathy goes out to the entire community affected by the act. They were Matthew Alexander, Samaria Blackwell, Amrajit Johal, Jasvinder Kaur, Jaswinder Singh, Amrajit Sekhon, Carly Smith, and John Weiser.
We are praying for these people and their families. And as members of youth ourselves, we have the drive to bring social justice and change for our future in order to prevent these violent acts from occurring. The future will be run by us, youth, so it's important for us to take action.
Firstly, we hope to pass stronger gun control laws to end gun violence. The United States is far too lenient with guns, as anyone, including individuals with mental illnesses, can get a gun. This results in hate crimes, school shootings, and other acts of violence. With stricter gun control laws, we can put an end to hate crimes and shootings and prevent innocent lives from being lost.
It is so sad to see all these terrible shootings that have happened in the past. It's even worse to see the government not do anything about it. Shootings are happening all the time and everywhere. As previous speakers have said, there's school shootings, and even recently the Indianapolis one, Atlanta, Wisconsin, even here in Austin, actually 5 minutes away from my house, and I walk there a lot on the weekend. And so we need to take action. We need to make this country a safer and more equal place. And to do that, we need to create better gun control laws.
Secondly, there have been a series of Asian hate crimes happening recently. So we hope that our future generation can be educated about other races, cultures, and ethnicities so that we can prevent these hate crimes from happening in the future. No one is born racist. People are taught hate and racism, and we need to stop that.
Educating people really significantly helps changing people's mindsets. And it's possible for racist people to change. And a good example is a former KKK leader's son. His name was Derek Black. He was a father of the KKK leader, and he was destined to be the next one. He was homeschooled all his life and taught white supremacy from a young age. But once he reached college, he was no longer homeschooled. And he went to a college filled with people of all races, religions, ethnicities, and cultures. And he became friends with many of these people. And his friends showed them their culture, invited him over on religious holidays, and basically just educated him. And Black realized that his views and the KKK's views were wrong. So he left them, and he didn't become the next leader of the KKK. So people can change. They can literally change from being a Ku Klux Klan member. And it's even better if we start from a young age. So it's important that we teach our other kids and children, especially in schools. It's important to teach them in schools so we can prevent these hate crimes from even happening in the first place.
Ultimately, we were devastated by the recent acts of violence, and we're praying for all those who lost their lives.
We strive for a better and safer future where we can ensure we have proper gun control laws in place and are actively educating individuals about different races, cultures, religions, and ethnicities. And I encourage everyone to try to learn something new today. We all live in our own houses, our own cocoons, but try to make it a goal to learn about a new culture or maybe make a new friend.
A quote by Mahatma Gandhi is, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sanya and Nabila. It was really wonderful to hear from both of you. I'm so glad that we have youth like you and Khushal in our community, and it gives me more hope for the future. And I think everyone in the chat is agreeing. Now we will be having an encore by Ruta Parna, who is a professional vocalist and singer. She was just on maybe half an hour ago. She will do another, I think, 3-minute song, something very short. And then we will be closing out and doing the community open mic. So please, please stick around for that, especially if you have something to say. We would love for people who haven't already spoken to have a chance to speak with the community directly and discuss. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Khushal. In the Hindu verbatim, the phrase Shri Ganesh signifies the start of something especially. the start of something good and positive. He's the remover of obstacles. So as my next song, I will be singing this Ganesh Vandana to keep spreading positiveness. एक दंत दयावंत चार भुजाधारी, एक दंत दयावंत चार भुजाधारी, माथे पे सिंदूर सोहे मूसे की सवारी, माथे पे सिंदूर सोहे मूसे की सवारी, पान चढ़े फूल चढ़े, पान चढ़े फूल चढ़े और चढ़े मेवा, लड्डुअन का भोग लगे संत करे सेवा, पान चढ़े फूल चढ़े और चढ़े मेवा, लड्डुअन का भोग लगे संत करे सेवा। जय गणेश जय गणेश जय गणेश देवा, माता जाकी पार्वती पिता महादेवा। जय गणेश जय गणेश जय गणेश देवा, माता जाकी पार्वती पिता महादेवा। आंधन को आँख देत कोधिन को काया, आंधन को आँख देत कोधिन को काया, बांझण को पुत्र देत निर्धन को माया, सूर्य शाम शरण आए, सूर्य शाम शरण आए, सफल कीजिए सेवा, माता जाकी पार्वती पिता महादेवा। जय गणेश जय गणेश जय गणेश देवा, माता जाकी पार्वती पिता महादेवा। Thank you so much.
Unmute. There we go. Thank you very much for that. That was a beautiful way to close out our program with our speakers that we had scheduled. I want to thank our co-organizers, IAC, Dr. Amarjit Singh and the Singh Sabha Gurdwara for helping us with the program today. All of our speakers who were incredible, and I was really struck by the threads that seemed to be drawn through everything that people were saying in terms of what we need to do as a community, what we're up against, and where our power is. I also want to just let you know that AFSA is here to support survivors of violence in Asian and immigrant communities 24 hours a day, free and confidential in whatever language that you're comfortable in. Our hotline is 877-281-8371. And even if you're not a survivor of violence, we do refer to other resources. We do provide support, so feel free to call us if you need something. I'm going to go ahead and end the live stream right now. Thank you for those of you joining us on YouTube and Facebook. And then we're going to proceed to the open mic. So anybody who's in the room, in the Zoom room, who'd like to speak or express